Welcome to a TGME News Special Report. Hello, my name is Tim Gear, and today is May 4th, 1971. Today marks the one-year anniversary of one of the most shocking events in our nation's recent memory. On this day last year, 28 National Guard troops opened fire on a crowd of protesting students on the campus of Kent State University, killing 4 and wounding 9 others. To better understand this national tragedy, let's look back on the events leading up to that fateful day. The root of this protest...
Get out of Nam!
Anyway, the root of this protest...
Get out of Nam!
Calm. The root of the protest that led...
Get out of Nam! Is that calmer?
The root of the protest that led to the shootings was the announcement of escalation in the Vietnam War on April 30th, 1970 by President Nixon. The decision to invade Cambodia and therefore draft an additional 150,000 troops sparked national protests. The counterculture movement was already in full swing, as was opposition to the Vietnam War. Political resistance to government action, and specifically the Vietnam War, had never been higher, and protests were planned nationally on college campuses, a breeding ground for the counterculture and anti-war movements. On Saturday, May 2nd, after a night of protests that shook the small college town of Kent, the governor of Ohio sent National Guard troops to calm the campus down. By May 3rd, nearly 1,000 National Guardsmen engulfed the campus. A provocative speech made by the governor later that day added to the tension, as well as the burning of the campus ROTC building. The resistance to the Guards' presence, the anti-war sentiment, and the governor's remarks led to another protest being planned the next day. By noon of May 4th, around 3,000 protesters had gathered as university and Guard officials tried to ban the rally. Shortly after noon, the decision was made to ban the rally, and protesters were ordered to disperse. When students refused, Guardsmen launched tear gas and moved in to disperse the students. After chasing students onto the practice football field, then retreating to the top of the hill, the Guardsmen fired. For days after, protests across the country flared as anger towards government reached new levels. National debate over whether the Guards' actions were justifiable self-defense or unwarranted violence intensified. To this day, legal action is just beginning, and it remains to be seen if the Guardsmen will face criminal or civil responsibility for their actions. The tragic events of this day have greatly shifted many people's opinion of the war and of the government. It has also catalyzed the counterculture and anti-war movement, even as the Vietnam War remains a seemingly endless conflict. For more coverage on the counterculture movement and to provide a backstory for the events that we remember today, we now turn to Maddie for a special report on the counterculture movement.
Thank you, Tim. As my co-anchor said, I'm going to provide you with a backstory of the counterculture movement. The counterculture movement developed in the United States in the late 1960s. Also known as the hippie and/or druggie era, which in fact it was, the movement was a rejection of social norms and conformity of the 1950s. The youth was rebellious, self-indulgent, and unconventional. Although it was a minority movement, consisting of 10% of the American youth, the movement resulted in new cultural attitudes spreading nationwide. The counterculture movement, otherwise known as the Third Great Awakening, was merely an intense rally for social as well as instances for governmental change. Fascination with psychedelic, trippy drugs and radical sexual ideals were the it thing for the 60s American youth. Teens experimented with marijuana, LSD, and cocaine, which eventually led to popping pills and doing shrooms. However, authorities have banned the use of LSD, which disheartened many drug fanatics. Surprisingly, a well-known and highly recognized Harvard professor, Thomas Leary, acknowledged and openly promoted the use of LSD. Maybe he thought it would help his dedicated students focus more and become more driven for success. Obviously not, since Leary coined the iconic phrase of the movement, "Turn on, tune in, and drop out." And drop out they did. Drop acid, that is. This era was definitely a summer of love. American youth also encountered a new sexual revolution. The use of birth control and the rejection of traditional values regarding a person's sexuality shed light on the youth's casual attitude on sex. As well, public nudity and other signs of reckless sexual liberation were more commonplace. Although some were not married, living together outside of marriage was not strange whatsoever. Also, this movement brought about a sense of individualism in the people who supported it. At the height of this was the unusual fashion. Unconventional outlooks on appearance contributed to the lack of traditional values in prior decades. Men were seen with long, raggedy-looking hair, as if they had not showered in days. As well, large hair was in. Women also had long hair, and in it flowers or beads. The style of the era was bell-bottom jeans, tie-dye shirts, beads, and much more eccentric styling choices. A short-lived change promoted by the movement was the formation of communal, mirror-image utopian societies. Communes would elect their own leaders and create and enforce their own laws, completely disregarding the capitalist system of the United States government. Some communes were religiously based, influenced by astrological, earth-centered, or even Eastern philosophies. Although there were nearly 2,000 communes, all failed due to the economic hardships and the power of federal authorities. A lasting change that attributed to the movement was the alteration in the American diet. Most people in the era adopted the habit of becoming a vegetarian. This dietary change allowed for the distribution of wheat germ, granola, and yogurt, which were foreign to America the decade prior. Although this was a change within the movement, the group's lifestyle expanded nationwide, affecting millions. However, the most common bond amongst the youth was not their passion with drugs, sex, or fashion, but it was music. Musical entertainment of the 50s derived from Patsy Cline, Nat King Cole, Johnny Cash, and the infamous Elvis Presley. When the 60s came about, the music took a drastic turn. Social conformity was at the heart of the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco, California. Rock and roll turned into psychedelic rock in the later end of the 1960s, with artists such as Jimi Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane, The Doors, and The Grateful Dead. Rock and roll music had the intention of enhancing the experience for listeners, experimenting with LSD and other mind-altering drugs, sending them into a deeper trip. The lyrics of these songs were often unusual and had subliminal messages about the Vietnam War.
Thank you, Maddie. Now to provide an alternate source of first-hand information on this movement and the Kent State shooting, we have a very special guest. Without further ado, we bring you Wavy Gravy!
Thank you, Tim, and welcome to this very special interview. Welcome, Mr. Wavy Gravy. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, and all of yours, of course.
So, Wavy, first we were going to give a little backstory for our viewers who do not know you that well.
Well, who hasn't heard of Wavy Gravy?
For starters, is your birth name really Wavy Gravy?
Nah, it's Hugh Romney, but all the cool people call me Gravy. Wavy Gravy.
Why do they call you Wavy Gravy?
It's a magical drug called LSD.
Oh, that's enough. Next question. Are you supportive of the Vietnam War?
Nah, man. Just want to make love, not war.
What is your outlook on Woodstock?
Dude, it was crazy. Chicks were insane, music was loud, and the drugs were on point.
Okay. What was something interesting that happened to you?
I knew this guy named Bertie Einstein. It's kind of a big deal.
And that sums up our interview with Mr. Wavy Gravy. Thank you for
you.
tuning in to TGME Studios, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Welcome, Mr. Wavy Gravy.
It's
Thank you.
was already in full swing, as was opposition.
What was something interesting that happened to you?
Well, I'm a friend with this guy named Bert